It was supposed to be nothing more than a simple Saturday outing. Laura Bennett had promised her daughter, Emily, a trip to the shopping mall after a long week of school. Emily was only 7, full of endless curiosity, her laughter echoing through the halls of their home. That morning as she picked out her favorite pink dress with tiny white flowers, Laura smiled, thinking it would be a carefree afternoon. A chance to share pretzels, buy a new pair of shoes, maybe even stop at the toy store before heading home. The mall was bustling that day, filled with families, music from the food court, and the comforting smell of cinnamon rolls drifting through the air. Hand in hand, the two wandered from store to store, Emily pointing at glittery sneakers and stuffed animals, while Laura watched her with quiet amusement. They paused at a fountain in the center of the mall, where children tossed pennies and made wishes. Emily leaned over, whispering something to the water that only she could hear, her tiny fingers clutching Laura's hand tightly. In that moment, Laura felt at peace, unaware that this ordinary day would soon shatter her world into pieces. As they approached the restroom near the food court, Emily tugged gently at her mother's arm. "Mom, I need to go," she whispered, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Laura hesitated, glancing at the restroom door. It wasn't far, and dozens of people moved in and out of the food court around them. She reassured herself, it was safe. She had always been careful, always cautious, but she decided just this once to wait outside by the entrance while Emily went in. After all, what could possibly go wrong inside a crowded mall restroom in the middle of the day? Laura leaned against the wall near the door, scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone, while keeping an ear open for the familiar sound of Emily's shoes tapping back toward her. She expected her daughter to emerge in less than a minute, maybe 2. But as moments stretched into minutes, her comfort turned to unease. She stood up straighter, glancing at the door every few seconds, convinced Emily would come out at any moment with her usual bright smile. But the door remained closed, strangers walking in and out, none of them her little girl. At first, Laura tried to reason with herself. Maybe Emily was just washing her hands longer, or maybe she was waiting for a stall to open. But then came the creeping dread, an instinct, a mother's intuition, that something wasn't right. She peered through the restroom door, calling softly, "Emily, are you okay?" Her voice blended with the echo of running water and muffled footsteps inside. No reply. And in that instant, Laura's heart sank, though she didn't yet realize that this would be the last moment she would see her daughter as she once knew her. The moment Laura realized Emily wasn't coming back out, her pulse quickened. She pushed open the restroom door, her eyes darting from stall to stall. A few women looked up, startled, but none had seen a little girl in a pink dress. Each stall she checked was empty. Panic crawled through her veins as she rushed back into the mall corridor, her voice trembling as she called Emily's name. The crowd moved around her, oblivious, their shopping bags swinging, conversations flowing, while her world was quietly collapsing. Within minutes, she ran to the nearest security guard, her words stumbling over each other as she explained what had happened. Radios crackled to life, and guards fanned out through the building. Announcements blared through the speakers. "Attention shoppers, we have a missing child. Please keep an eye out for a 7-year-old girl, pink dress, brown hair." Laura stood frozen as the words echoed across the mall, her knees weak. The shoppers began to look around nervously, some whispering, others stopping to ask if they could help. The search started small. Security checked every hallway, every bathroom, every store in the immediate area. Employees peeked behind counters, storage rooms, and dressing areas. But Emily was nowhere. A strange, suffocating silence seemed to follow Laura as she trailed behind the guards. She couldn't shake the feeling that Emily had simply vanished into thin air. Surveillance footage was pulled immediately, and when the officers showed Laura the grainy black and white video, her stomach turned. There was Emily, entering the restroom. But what chilled everyone was what came next. She never came back out. By then, local police had arrived, their flashing lights painting the mall entrance in red and blue. Officers moved swiftly, cordoning off the restrooms and questioning shoppers. Laura clung to one of the officers, begging them not to waste a second. Every minute felt like an eternity. Some shoppers claimed they had seen a man lingering near the food court. Others swore they had heard a child crying in the parking garage. Each tip sent officers running, but every lead fizzled into nothing. Emily had left no trace, as if the walls of the mall had swallowed her whole. The night dragged on. The mall, once filled with laughter and chatter, was now filled with sirens, police dogs, and frantic voices echoing through empty halls. Laura's voice grew hoarse from shouting her daughter's name. Every corner turned up empty, every question unanswered, and as the hours passed, the terrifying thought grew louder in her mind: Emily hadn't simply wandered off. Someone, or something, had taken her. In the days that followed, the mall became less a place of shopping and more a crime scene. Flyers with Emily's face were taped to every wall, every streetlight, every gas station within miles. Laura stayed up for nights on end, sitting at her kitchen table with her phone clutched in her hand, waiting for it to ring, and it did, sometimes dozens of times a day. People claimed they had seen Emily at playgrounds, in diners, on buses, always with someone suspicious nearby. Each call sent a surge of hope through Laura's chest, only for that hope to collapse when investigators reported back, false alarm. Police combed through surveillance footage, not just from the mall but from traffic cameras in nearby streets, parking garages and highways. Hours of video were watched frame by frame. Every child with brown hair became a potential lead, every blurry shadow was scrutinized, but still, nothing. The footage remained haunting Emily entering the restroom, the door swinging shut behind her, and then emptiness. No exit, no struggle, no sign of what had happened next. It was as if she had stepped into another world and never returned. Months slipped into years, and the case grew colder. The initial media frenzy died down, reporters moved on, and the public began to forget. The missing posters faded in the sun, their edges curling, the ink running with rain. Even neighbors stopped mentioning Emily's name, their pity turning into silence. Laura, however, could not move on. Every corner of her house remained a shrine to her daughter, her toys untouched, her bed neatly made, her school backpack still hanging on the hook by the door. To Laura, time had frozen on that single day. Detectives tried to reassure her with statistics, with words like child abduction rings and possible trafficking, but none of it mattered. What haunted Laura most were the dead ends. The countless times someone swore they saw Emily's face in a crowd, only for the trail to evaporate. A diner waitress in another state swore a little girl with the same eyes had been sitting in a booth with an older couple. A truck driver reported seeing a frightened child peering out of a van's back window. Each lead seemed promising, but none ever connected. Each one ended the same way: frustration. Eventually, even the investigators grew quiet. Phone calls stopped. Updates ceased. Files were shelved, buried beneath newer cases. But Laura's search never ended. She drove for hours on highways following rumors, knocked on strangers' doors, chased after shadows. She couldn't shake the question that haunted her nights. How could a child vanish in a crowded mall, in broad daylight, and leave not a single trace behind? The first year was agony. Laura woke up every morning believing it had all been a nightmare, only to walk past Emily's empty room, and feel the crushing weight of reality. Holidays were the hardest. Christmas stockings hung untouched, birthday candles never lit, a tiny bicycle gathering dust in the garage. She refused to put anything away. To her, cleaning Emily's room meant admitting she wasn't coming back. And Laura wasn't ready to let go. By the second year, the world had begun to move on. Neighbors stopped knocking on her door with casseroles and sympathetic smiles. Reporters no longer called for updates. Even some family members urged her to accept it, to try and heal. But Laura couldn't. She spent hours scrolling through online forums about missing children, contacting psychics, reading true crime blogs, desperate for answers. Every time a news story broke about a rescued child, her heart leaped, only to shatter again when it wasn't Emily. Her marriage didn't survive the silence. Emily's father withdrew into himself, drowning in guilt and anger. Arguments turned into long stretches of silence, until one day, he simply left. Laura barely noticed. She was consumed by her obsession, her every thought tied to the tiny girl who had slipped through her fingers. Nights were the worst, when the house was quiet and her mind replayed that moment outside the restroom, over and over, like a film stuck on repeat. By the third year, Laura had become a ghost of herself. She quit her job, unable to focus on anything beyond the search. Bills piled up, the house fell into disrepair, but none of it mattered. She joined search groups, followed up on tips that led her across state lines, and even sat for hours outside schools, parks, and playgrounds, scanning faces in the crowd. Every little girl she saw felt like a possibility. Every laugh in the distance made her head snap around, hoping, praying, only to be met with disappointment. The fourth year brought something worse than grief. It brought emptiness. The world around her seemed muted, as though she was drifting through it without truly existing. Emily's face haunted her dreams, sometimes as the small child she had lost, other times as an older version. What she might look like now, with longer hair, maybe taller, maybe thinner. And though the search had grown colder, one truth never changed: Laura couldn't stop. Somewhere, somehow, she believed Emily was still out there. And one day, she would find her. It was a gray morning when Laura found herself driving aimlessly along the coast, far from the city where her life had once been whole. The ocean had always been a place she avoided. Its vastness, its constant motion, reminded her of how small and powerless she felt. But on that day, 4 years after Emily vanished, something inside her urged her to stop. She pulled her car into a lonely parking lot and stepped out onto the sand, the cold wind tangling her hair as she stared at the horizon. The air smelled of salt and dampness, heavy and unwelcoming, yet strangely soothing. The beach was nearly empty, only the distant cries of gulls and the rhythmic crash of waves filled the silence. Laura walked slowly, her hands buried in her coat pockets, her thoughts drifting between past and present. She hadn't planned to come here. It was as if her body had chosen the place for her, dragging her miles away from her house of grief and silence. Every step left an imprint in the wet sand, quickly washed away by the tide, and she thought bitterly about how easily lives could vanish in the same way. Here 1 second, gone the next. As she wandered, she noticed the beach had a strange atmosphere that morning. The fog clung low over the water, curling into ghostly shapes. The further she walked, the more isolated it felt, as though she had stepped out of time. For once, her thoughts weren't about searching or chasing leads. They were quieter, almost numb, until she reached a point where the shore curved sharply. It was there, at the edge of her vision, that something made her stop. At first, she thought it was just another couple out for a walk, their figures blurred by the fog. But then she saw the child with them, a small girl, her head bowed, her steps light and delicate against the sand. Laura squinted, her breath catching. Something about the way the child moved tugged at her heart. The tilt of the head, the little swing of her arms, it was so achingly familiar. She stood frozen, every muscle in her body stiff with disbelief. Her pulse raced as her mind battled itself. No, it can't be. I'm just imagining. It's grief playing tricks again. Yet, the closer she looked, the harder it was to deny. The girl's hair caught in the wind the same way Emily's used to. Even from a distance, Laura swore she saw that same gentle, hesitant way of walking. And as the couple turned slightly, guiding the child by the arm, a wave of dread swept through Laura. This wasn't just a stranger's daughter. Somewhere deep inside, she knew. She had seen those small footsteps before. Laura's breath caught in her throat as she stared through the thinning fog. The couple walked steadily, their pace unhurried, but the child between them moved differently. Her shoulders slouched, her head lowered, almost as if she was reluctant to be there. Laura's eyes fixed on her every movement. It wasn't just the way she walked. It was the tiny, almost unconscious gesture. The girl tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, quick and nervous, exactly the way Emily always had when she felt shy in public. Laura's knees weakened, her pulse thundering in her ears. Could it really be her after all these years? Her mind rebelled. No, this can't be real. She had chased too many false sightings before. Girls at playgrounds, children in grocery stores, shadows in passing cars. Each time, she had embarrassed herself, running after strangers, crying out a name that didn't belong to them. But this felt different. The recognition wasn't fleeting. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was a bone, deep certainty, a pull so strong it almost dragged her forward across the sand. Laura took a cautious step closer, then another, her shoes sinking into the damp shoreline. The wind whipped harder, making her voice tremble as she whispered, "Emily." But the word was swallowed by the roar of the surf. The girl didn't turn. The couple seemed unaware of her presence, their bodies angled protectively on either side of the child. For a chilling second, Laura wondered if they were shielding her, or keeping her trapped. She moved faster now, her heart hammering, the distance between them shrinking. The girl shifted slightly, lifting her face just enough for Laura to see her profile. It was brief, just a flicker through the mist, but it was enough. Laura froze, her breath shuddering out of her lungs. The curve of the cheek, the shape of the eyes. It wasn't just familiar. It was undeniable. This was the face she had kissed goodnight, the face she had seen in 100 photographs. The girl wasn't a stranger. She was Emily. But the recognition didn't bring relief, it brought terror. Because in that instant, Laura noticed the way the couple reacted. The man's hand tightened sharply around the girl's wrist, tugging her closer. The woman glanced back over her shoulder, scanning the foggy beach as though sensing they were being watched. Their steps quickened. And Emily, if it truly was Emily, turned her head just enough to meet Laura's eyes. The look was unmistakable fear, confusion, and something else, a silent plea for help. Laura's entire body trembled as the word escaped her lips again, louder this time, carried by the crashing waves, "Emily." Her voice cracked, raw with desperation. The couple froze mid-step, their bodies stiffening as if struck by the sound. For a brief, breathless moment, the world seemed to stop. The little girl slowly turned her head, strands of windblown hair falling across her face. Their eyes locked, and Laura felt her heart break all over again. Those eyes, They were the same soft brown she had kissed every night before bed, the same eyes she had seen in her dreams for the past 4 years. The girl's mouth opened slightly, as if she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Recognition flickered in her gaze, followed instantly by fear. Before Laura could take another step, the man yanked her sharply by the arm, pulling her close against his side. The woman leaned in, whispering something hurriedly in the child's ear, her face tight with panic. It wasn't the reaction of a family being mistaken for someone else. It was the reaction of people who had something to hide. Laura's instincts screamed. She broke into a run, her shoes sinking into the wet sand, her voice rising above the thunder of the ocean. "Emily, it's me! It's Mommy!" She didn't care how she sounded, didn't care if she was wrong. Every fiber of her being told her she wasn't. The couple quickened their pace, half dragging the girl now, heading toward a narrow path that wound up the dunes. Emily stumbled once, her small hand reaching out ever so slightly, as if trying to grasp the air between them. The distance closed painfully slow. Laura's lungs burned, her legs ached, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She could see the terror in Emily's eyes more clearly now, wide, desperate, silently begging. Her daughter hadn't forgotten her. She knew. She recognized her mother. The realization sent a surge of strength through Laura, but it also sharpened the danger. If these people had taken Emily, then what would they do now that she had been found? Just as Laura was about to reach them, the man shot a look over his shoulder. His expression wasn't one of confusion. It was one of calculation. Cold, deliberate, dangerous. He tightened his grip on Emily's wrist, his pace breaking into a near sprint. The woman shoved him forward, urging him up the dune. And in that split second, Laura knew one thing with chilling certainty. The nightmare she thought had ended 4 years ago was only beginning again. Right here, on this desolate stretch of beach. Laura's screams echoed down the shoreline, carried away by the crashing waves, but the couple disappeared into the fog with Emily before anyone else could see. By the time she reached the dunes, they were gone, swallowed by the mist, leaving only footprints in the sand that the tide quickly erased. For hours, Laura searched, calling her daughter's name until her voice gave out, but the beach returned only silence. What she saw that day could never be explained by coincidence. She knew in her heart it was Emily. After 4 long years, her daughter was alive, close enough to touch, but once again ripped from her grasp, and so Laura is left with the same haunting question that began in that mall restroom. Where is Emily now? Maybe one day we'll have the answer, but until then, the mystery remains.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.